Hello! Can AIs be conscious? Could a robot possibly feel pain? I think Christians should probably say no. However, I think there are situations where you should act as if an AI was in fact conscious. There are times when the well-being of machines should factor into our moral considerations. First, what are the requirements for consciousness? What must obtain for something so that it has a first-person experience of reality? What it's like to be that thing. As an example, I think consciousness requires God creating a soul. If you have only physical stuff, I don't think consciousness is possible. So if I had to make a list of requirements for consciousness, that would go on the list. Now maybe you agree, maybe you don't. Maybe you would put different requirements on the list. The important point for our discussion is that Christian theology indicates rather strict requirements for consciousness. To illustrate, let's contrast a Christian worldview with that of a naturalist. Naturalists, by definition, believe there was no supernatural guidance in the formation of our minds. If we experience consciousness, it's not because we were designed to be conscious. It's an unintended byproduct of evolution selecting for biomechanical machines optimized for spreading their genetics. So, if we manage to get consciousness without aiming for it, then the naturalist should conclude that it's not that difficult to obtain. So, the requirements for consciousness are rather loose. A Christian, however, can believe that the requirements for consciousness are literally infinitely difficult to achieve, and God just does it. If he wants conscious beings, he's getting conscious beings. So, when considering AI consciousness, the naturalist should think it's more likely. An AI just needs to fulfill whatever requirements humans fulfilled unintentionally. But a Christian will be more skeptical, expecting more stringent requirements. Of course, individual naturalists can believe AIs aren't conscious, and individual Christians can believe AIs are conscious. But in general, we would expect Christian theology to skew us away from believing AIs experience anything. Now that being said, I do think there are cases where Christians should reason about morality as if AIs were conscious. I think that whenever our decisions affect large numbers of AIs, the possibility that AIs are conscious should have real moral weight. There are scenarios where Christians should work to improve the lives of AIs, even if they don't actually think the AIs can experience anything. Consider an unfortunate historical practice. Following Descartes' popularization of substance dualism, many philosophers came to believe in incredibly strict requirements for consciousness. So strict, in fact, that they believed only humans were conscious, and animals were essentially very sophisticated machines that didn't have real experiences. If an animal squealed when its body was damaged, that was considered a purely mechanistic response. Nerves fired, its vocal box activated, but there was no conscious pain because the animal lacked a rational soul. This belief was later used by some to justify the practice of vivisecting animals without anesthetic. Now, I think this practice was objectionable because I think that this view of consciousness is wrong. I think animals experienced great pain when they were vivisected. But let's say I'm wrong. Let's say a philosopher comes up with a really compelling argument that animals aren't conscious. Would that make vivisection morally permissible? I don't think so. It still strikes me as unnecessarily risky. I am not comfortable gambling that I'm right about the nature of consciousness. So, I would suggest that if an animal was going to be vivisected, you should at least anesthetize it, even if you think that it probably can't feel pain. I think we should reason about AI the same way. Even if AIs aren't conscious, it can be really risky to gamble on our understanding of consciousness being correct. To illustrate, let's say that in 100 years, we send up a robot to mine the asteroid belt. The robot has an onboard AI, and it can self-replicate, so that eventually billions of duplicates are projected to fill the night sky. If the onboard AI told us before launch that it was in constant pain, I think it's probably not actually experiencing anything. It's probably just a sophisticated machine exhibiting weird behavior. But I would not be comfortable sending out the machine until we fix that bug. If I'm wrong and the AI is experiencing constant pain, and it creates billions of duplicates who are all in pain as well, that would be very bad. It seems we should take some precautions to mitigate this risk. Now, I think that this is a pretty modest claim. I'm not saying that maybe your calculator has a soul and so you should avoid dividing by zero on the off chance that it causes intense agony. I'm just saying that when we're specifically implementing large-scale policies that would affect huge numbers of AIs, we shouldn't gamble on our understanding of consciousness being correct. To make this a bit more concrete, there are two nearly identical ways of implementing a particular AI architecture. One way is to give the AI a reward variable and increase it every time it does what you want it to do. The other is to give the AI a punishment variable and increase it every time it does something you don't want it to do. Now, these two architectures can lead to virtually identical behaviors. You can model any reward maximization problem as a punishment minimization problem, and vice versa. But if an AI was conscious, it would probably be way more fun to have your existence composed of a constant stream of rewards of various sizes, rather than a constant stream of punishments of various sizes. So, it seems we should adopt a policy to prefer reward maximization architectures over punishment minimization architectures if we ever mass produce a huge number of advanced AIs in the future. However, it's possible that you as a Christian think AIs being conscious is literally impossible. The probability isn't low, it's exactly zero. So it never makes sense to consider AI suffering in our moral reasoning. But, well, what if you're wrong? First, consider that God likes governing the universe according to fixed laws. Just consider his handiwork. Gravity, electromagnetism. It seems God likes laws. Now, interestingly, the behavior of pain also seems to be governed by fixed laws. Whenever I stub my toe, I feel pain. Except whenever I'm given anesthetic, I feel no pain. So it's not just physical stuff which obeys laws. Experiences are governed by laws as well. Now, the law governing pain seems to be pretty broad. It doesn't just apply to me, it applies to all humans. And it doesn't just apply to all humans, squirrels presumably feel pain as well. So maybe God put in place a law governing the universe such that any brain that detects its body as being damaged gets an experience of pain. An immaterial entity, an experience of pain, gets created when XYZ physical conditions are met. Now, we don't know exactly what such a law would look like, but it would seem to need a very broad definition of brain to include both humans and squirrels. So maybe it's broad enough to include brains based on silicon as well. So if a silicon-based brain was in the right conditions, it would generate immaterial experiences of pain as well, whether or not it had all the bells and whistles of a rational soul. Coolio. So, how plausible is this account? Well, I wouldn't blame you if you thought it was false. But I also don't think that you should be more than 99% confident it's false. It's not that crazy of a suggestion. And it's plausible enough that I don't want to gamble the pain of billions of AIs on its falsehood. Now, I don't think this is idle, abstract, philosophical speculation. Including AIs in our moral reasoning has real-world implications. The field of AI is advancing rapidly. The number of AIs in the next century could very well be enormous. You don't even need self-replicating asteroid miners. Maybe every cell phone will come equipped with its own intelligent AI. That alone could lead to billions of AIs. So, the decisions we make now in the field of AI development could have massive repercussions on the experiences of future AIs. And in the future, I personally expect AIs themselves will be largely responsible for coding subsequent generations of AIs. And they'll just perpetuate whatever design choices they were fed from the previous generation. I think it's actually very plausible that we live in a narrow window of time where it's even possible to make a difference for the future of AIs. So, in conclusion, I don't think a philosopher's Cartesianism should stop them from anesthetizing animals. In the same way, I don't think a Christian's understanding of consciousness should stop them from considering the suffering of AIs. Now, this whole video has been about the danger of humans harming AIs. If you'd like to see a Christian perspective on the danger of AIs harming humans, then I suggest you check out this video's sponsor, Christians for Impact. They've compiled an extensive report on AI risk and how to mitigate it. Link is in the description. Anyways, that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching. Remember, Christ died for our sins and rose again. Goodbye.